Good afternoon, and thank you for joining this live BSI webinar on fostering positive culture and well-being in the automotive supply chain with ISO 45001. I am Ellie Mosquita, and I'm here today to help facilitate the webinar. With me today are our guest speakers, Kate Field and Rob Brown. Kate is BSI's Global Product Champion for Occupational Health and Safety. Kate acts as expert and ambassador on OHS across BSI. Kate started her career with the Health and Safety Executive as a regulatory inspector before moving into policy and later the private sector. With a health and safety career spanning 2 decades, Kate has authored regulatory and technical guidance, written articles for a range of publications, and is a global keynote speaker and presenter. Rob is BSI's Global Product Champion for the automotive sector, recognised globally as an expert on automotive quality management systems and lean manufacturing. Rob has over 25 years of industry experience in the UK and USA. During 18 years with SMMT, Rob spent 6 years implementing lean manufacturing in the supply chain and 12 years as the IATF SMMT Oversight Manager as a leading expert in both the specification and management of the IATF automotive scheme. Today's agenda is as follows. We're going to cover a brief overview of BSI, then we're going to take a look at the benefits of a comprehensive health and safety management system, how ISO 45001 aligns with other key standards, the elements of the new standard, and the timeline for migration for OSAS 18001 to ISO 45001. Before I hand over to Kate, I wanted to take the opportunity to give you a brief background on BSI. BSI is a truly global brand with 4,600 BSI colleagues delivering services to 84,000 clients who operate in 193 countries across all continents. In addition, we work with over 12,200 experts to develop standards. And today we have a strong footprint in our target markets and do business with 50% of Fortune 500 companies, 84% of the UK FTSE and 81% of the Japanese Nikkei 225 index. So our business is increasingly diversified geographically and in terms of the products and services we provide. Our business includes 63,500 consulting days in the last 12 months, including environmental health and safety, cyber and information security, as well as supply chain. 63% of our people and 66% of our revenue is generated outside the UK. BSI started life in 1901, the day the Queen Victoria died. The then Institution of Civil Engineers met to standardise the material properties of rail tracks, and this led to the first standard. Those same principles apply today as we work with industry to agree best practice, and this ranges from the ultra-mundane, how to make a cup of tea, to connected and autonomous vehicles, to information security, AI, and smart cities. BSI has originated many of the world's leading management system standards, which all started life as British standards before becoming widely renowned international standards. The most popular is 9001, which is now adopted by over 1 million organisations. And of course, it forms the foundations of several sector-specific quality management system standards, including IATF 16949. All standards are evolving and are reviewed regularly to ensure they reflect the needs of our changing world. Other important international standards where BSI has been instrumental include ISO 14001, and more recently BSI has been at the forefront of developing the new ISO standard for health and safety, which we're focusing on today. BSI has a Royal Charter. Royal Charters are granted by the Sovereign on the advice of the Privy Council. Today, new charters are normally reserved for bodies that work in the public interest. Before I hand over to Kate, we're going to launch our first poll of this afternoon, which you will see on your screens now. So the question is, thinking about your job role, which of the below statements best describes your level of responsibility for health and safety in your organisation? So health and safety is the main focus of my role. Health and safety is a component, but not the main focus. I'm not responsible for health and safety, and I don't know. So 26% of you say health and safety is the main focus of your role, and then we've got 61% for whom it is a component, and 13% who are not responsible for health and safety. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Kate Field for her comments and to kick off this afternoon's presentation.
Lovely, thank you, Ellie. Welcome to our listeners, and we've got a really diverse group there. So hopefully there will be something for all of you, and you will enjoy this afternoon's session. So we're going to start with, why health and safety? The simple, straightforward question, and I think morally, we understand that actually keeping our workforce health and safe in the workplace is important. And within the automotive supply chain, there are a number of health and safety issues that can affect the workforce, from noise and vibration through to vehicle movement and machinery. And we're lucky, for those of you who are listening in the UK, we have a really good regulatory system. But the reality is that, unfortunately, people are still either killed, injured, or made seriously ill by work. And there's a lot more that we can do. Those statistics are globally from the ILO, and we still have a long way to go. So it's important that we take steps to address that. And one of the things that's really been interesting this year is BSI commission a report on business continuity every year, and the report's just come out, and that looks at what do businesses, organizations actually consider to be the most significant disruptors. And you can see on the screen there that at the top is unplanned IT and telecom outage, so breakdown in terms of communication. But second is health and safety incidents. So organizations are saying that the thing that causes them the most disruption is health and safety after telecom outage. But the other thing that's really interesting, as you can see is circled there, is number 5 is product quality. And one of the things that we know from all the research that's gone into occupational health and safety is that poor health and safety will impact quality, and there we have it in statistics. And you can see also that the arrow and the +10 and +11, it shows from where it was last year. So health and safety has moved up 10 places and product quality has moved up 11. So very similar in terms of where they have moved up. And that's because there is this interrelationship. In some respects, it makes sense when you step back and think about it, because if your workforce don't feel looked after, why are they going to look after the product or the service that are actually delivering? They'll be more inclined to cut corners or not follow procedures. So actually, really good health and safety is really important in terms of products and quality. Rob, is there anything that you'd like to bring in terms of quality at that point?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I think one of the interesting things, just going back to that survey a minute ago, was 87% of people responded saying it was either their main or secondary responsibility. Ultimately, we all know quality is everyone's responsibility, and ultimately health and safety is everyone's responsibility. So that was good to see that number up at 87%. In terms of the number 5 there, in terms of product quality, incident and product recall, there's a lot of new requirements in the new standard, particularly around warranty management and focusing on product recall. So it's moved on from sort of like, right first time now into warranty management. And the point Kate makes about the link between, poor health and safety and the environment impacting on product qualities is seen through lots and lots of statistics. Hence the need for the new section within the new standard in 10.2.5 about warranty management, and the additional link within the standard referencing 45,000 under the health and safety banner. So yeah, thanks, Kate.
Thank you, Rob. The other thing that's just worth highlighting on there is at number 3, lack of talent and key skills, and that's something that we'll touch on shortly. So the survey also asked the organisations that responded to put some pound signs, or actually it was dollar signs. It's done in the US about how much these disruptions are costing, and you can see right at the top, number 1, health and safety incidents at nearly £1.2 billion. And if you compare that to number 8, cyber attack, which you often hear about organizations being worried about, what keeps their chief executive awake at night. You'll hear about cyber attack. Actually, it's a mere 144 million. So again, in terms of scale and the disruption and the cost to business, actually managing health and safety proactively will bring about huge benefits. Number 2 is reputation incidents. And, poor health and safety and poor reputation are going to be linked. There's been enough examples, in the media where poor health and safety costs organisations huge amounts of money. Most recent example in terms of, significant amount of money would be the Deepwater Horizon disaster, which has cost billions and billions within the area. So why do we do health and safety? We do it because of the moral imperative. There's of course legislation, but health and safety has a tangible impact on other areas, reputational damage. And I said I'd come back to talent retention. So one of the things that we are seeing is that particularly those in the automotive industry, where you've got high skilled workforce and there's there's competition for the right people, then having good health and safety and looking after the well-being of the workforce actually brings benefits in terms of not only retaining the talent, but also recruiting the right talents in the first place. So, focusing on protecting your people will do more than just address health and safety. And taking that people-centered approach is one that will make your organization more resilient. It will improve health and safety, it will help with quality, it will help with productivity, and you'll keep the best people.
Thanks very much, Kate. We're just about to launch our second poll of this afternoon. You will see the question on your screen now. So the recently published BCI Horizon Scan report shows that in 2018, health and safety was the second largest disruption and the costliest disruption to organisations worldwide. So thinking about your organisation, does health and safety rank among your top 3 priorities? Yes, no, or don't know? So 79% say yes, health and safety is one of the top 3 priorities. 14%, interestingly, saying no, and 7% not sure. So I'm going to hand back to Kate for comments and the rest of the presentation.
So thank you, Ellie. I think that's really interesting, and I think as the report suggests, health and safety is seen as a priority within organisations, and because organisations recognise the broader benefits. So I think that's really good to see. And for the 14% of you who are saying it's not one of your top 3 priorities, I hope it's in the top 5 at least. So just it's worth summarising then in terms of the benefits of implementing a health and safety management system, an ISO 45001 specifically. And Rob's going to talk about this shortly, but within the automotive supply chain, it can help you meet your customer specific requirements and maintain a strong performance on your supplier scorecard. A strong health and safety culture brought about by the need for leadership commitment and a workforce who are actively involved in health and safety. And culture is something that I'm going to come back to when I talk about 45001 in a little bit more detail. It's a robust way to demonstrate your social responsibility, or CSR, depending which terminology you use, or just sustainability, by showing your commitment to a safe, healthy and sustainable work environment. We've touched on, it provides a better working environment for your people, improving quality. It increases productivity as well as minimising the costs associated with injury and ill health. It will improve recruitment and retention, and also reduce absence rates. If you've got people who are healthy, then they're going to be in work and actually producing. It will increase organisational resilience because it's about proactive risk management and continual improvement, and that will only make your organisation stronger. And of course, it will strengthen your legal and regulatory compliance. So I will hand over to Rob to take us through a bit more.
Yeah. So I think the beauty of what we need to look at first is the fact that obviously ISO introduced a high-level structure, which now looks at 9,000, 14,000, 45,000, the sector-specific standards like IETF and also AS for 9100 all now adopt the high-level structure. And you can see in the slide that's on the screen at the moment, we're looking at sections 4 to sections 10, so context of the organisation, leadership planning, support, operation, performance evaluation and improvement. And you can see the alignment with the grey boxes. If you then look at the blue boxes, so there's some more additional requirements in terms of ISO and IETF specific. So in section 6, we talk about planning for change. In section 8, we talk about requirements for products and services, not just health and safety necessarily within the business. Design and development of products and services, control of externally provided resource products and services, production service provision, release of products and services, control of non-conforming products and outputs. And then we can see the red text boxes. We've got things like in leadership and worker participation. Yeah, so 45,001 talks about worker participation. It's not just about leadership, which goes back a little bit to the comment earlier. I think it was question 1 about who do we think about responsibilities. 87% believed it was their responsibility. So the worker participation bit comes in there. If you look under context of the organisation, it says understand the needs and expectations of workers and other interested parties. Yeah, so key organisation, key focus on the employee. And then obviously with quality management system for years and years, you go back through 9000 and ISO TS, we talked about policy and the need for a policy statement. And now we can see obviously with the 45, there's an occupational health and safety policy requirement, which leads into leadership, and that's the leadership team, not just the chief exec. We look across into planning, you'll see there's areas in there about social, psychological and physical hazard and identification, which is something very, very new in 9001, which obviously is the support for IETF, so big link there. Occupational health and safety objectives, planning, and planning to achieve them. So not just targets about Q, C and D. I mean, if you work for a lot of the bigger automotive organisations for years now, they've been doing Q, C, D, H and S. So that's bringing that in terms of best practice. You talk about management of change in the operation, and then in performance, you talk about things like the analysis of performance. So what are we measuring? What is the data telling us? What corrective actions or continuous improvement activities need to be put in place to increase health and safety? And obviously in improvement, look about incidents and the impact of incidents. And if we think about ISO and IETF, the ISO IETF joint standard, the goal is a reduction of variation and waste in the supply chain. So from the OEM, including the OEM, all the way down the supply chain. So I think you can see it's clearly embedded in all the associated standards. And going back a little about support in 714 about resource, so competency and things like that. If we talk about section 9, which is about internal audit, we've got 9001 internal audits, got 45,001 internal audits, got IETF internal audits, got 14,001 internal audits. So ultimately, the standards will go towards providing a sort of a base structure for us to do integrated audits as we move forward in time. And if we talk about ISO 45000 and IETF specifically, obviously 45001 is recognised by IETF. In the standard itself, it talks about the link. It says where third-party certification to ISO 45001 or equivalent. So at the time the standard was written, the equivalent was 18001 because 45 wasn't out, is recognised. It may be used to demonstrate the organisation's conformity to personal safety aspects of this requirement. So you can see even back in 2016 when the IETF released the new standard, we're talking about what's coming down the line in terms of ISO 45000. It talks about aspects of personal safety in clause 714, occupational health and safety being a key component of corporate responsibility, and that's in section 5. We know that section 5 is all about leadership and the involvement of individuals, not just the leadership team. Kate picked up earlier about a strong focus on legal and other requirements. Obviously, that's a massive thing on top of ISO IETF 16949 with statutory and regulatory and other customer-specific requirements, and we'll get onto customer-specific requirements in a little while. I think the next slide. And both standards talk about recognise the role of the human performance and error back to the impact of poor health and safety and the impact of product quality. And then if we talk about customer specifics, obviously we got ISO 9000, the base standard, IATF as the automotive sector specific requirements, and on top of that, we may have customer specific requirements. If we talk about the 9 members of IATF, we talk about BMW, for example. BMW on the 1st of April last year, and I think to be fair to the Germans, I don't realise 1st of April could be a bit of a joke in the UK. They released a new contract requirement on all suppliers mandating that the suppliers either had to be currently 18,000 certified with a migration plan to 45, or a plan for 45,001 certification, all third party, to be allowed to come into the process as either a current or new supplier. So over a year ago, BMW mandated 45,000. What typically happens with the IATF group, once one of the IATF OEMs states a position over time, and normally quite a short period of time, the other OEMs will move in that direction. So I think we'll see probably towards the end of this year, as an IATF meeting in October, we might see maybe some sanctioned interpretations come out against the IATF standard, saying rather than accepting demonstration, 45,001 may well be mandated by the 9 OEMs. If we look about Renault, another IATF one, they talk about 18,001 is one of the ways of providing evidence of this requirement. So that's going to move, because the 18,001 is going to be withdrawn in 2021. So read 45,001. Daimler have some requirements under sustainability, health, safety. So as an employer and suppliers ensures the work safety and health and a work within the framework of a national provision. So the regulatory supports continuous development of working environment, and a component of 45,001 obviously is the legal compliance and the continuous improvement. So I think what we'll see over time, the IATF OEMs will definitely move towards a more fixed position in terms of 45,001. There isn't an equivalent. When we get to March 2021, there won't be an equivalent, obviously, because 45 will be the only standard. So you'll see more and more requirements just from the IATF OEMs, and my expectation is the IATF OEM membership will grow over the next 2 years anyway to bring new OEMs. So rather than the 9, it'll go across probably Asia Pac OEMs as well. And if we talk about BSI specifically, we've got just over probably about 500 organisations third-party certified to 45,001 already. The example you'll see up here is about Rosti Automotive, big tier 1 supplier in the automotive industry, particularly around plastic moulding parts and painted assemblies. They have 4 manufacturing sites in the Midlands and up in Yorkshire, Pickering area, and big tier 1, and they're 45,001. And we're looking at how we worked with them, and the big thing they came back in terms of what they did in terms of the approach was this big thing about employee engagement. So it wasn't something that was mandated by the chief executive to the quality manager or the health and safety manager. It then became pushed into the organisation. The organisation very much involved the employees to develop the management system, and that was a big thing that came back and said that it can only enhance systems by involving all the employees or groups of employees within the organisation. So a key point of that is about team involvement and involvement of the employee, which is good. So I'm now going to hand back to Kate, who's going to carry on a little bit more about 45,000, and then we'll come back to the questions towards the end.
Lovely, thanks, Rob. So we've talked about ISO 45001. So what is it? And I'm particularly conscious that some of our listeners don't have health and safety in part of their remit. So I think it would be useful just to kind of go overview and give an overview and talk about what some of the key points are. So it is the new internationally recognised management system for occupational health and safety, and it was created to address the need to provide a consistent global framework. And we've just been hearing about supply chain, and one of the challenges before ISO 45001 was if you're operating globally, there wasn't a single global approach to occupational health and safety, and that was one of the key driving forces behind the introduction of this standard. And it's focused on a proactive prevention of injury and ill health, rather than just reactive, coming back to this point around continual improvement. It's got to be forward thinking, and providing an environment which is safe and healthy. So those 2 points are really important. So it's not just about the prevention of injury and ill health, it's about proactive provision of a safe and healthy workplace, and that's where some of the potentially broader wellbeing initiatives will come into. And really importantly, 45001 has this emphasis on leadership and culture, the culture of the organization, and that's something that you'll hear a little bit more about as we go through the presentation. So why is having a health and safety management system important, and why is it important to have a focus on culture? Well, this graph kind of just gives a representation of it. So, what you tend to have sort of when an organization starts to consider health and safety is you have kind of minimal compliance and sort of engineering solutions, so guards, hardware improvements. But it's kind of a reactive stage. And, as a result of that, you tend to have higher incidence rates. Then an organization evolves and starts to recognize that actually, taking a more proactive approach to managing health and safety will bring the benefits that we've talked on. And that's the point at which most organizations will, start to consider to introduce an actual management system. They recognize that having a management system provides them a best practice framework for managing the area of health and safety. And, and they see improvements in terms of incidence rates as a result of that sort of change and more proactive approach to health and safety. But then it kind of often plateaus, and that's because actually the underlying culture of the organization hasn't changed. And that's where, and when we talk about culture, this is where the behavior and the leadership at the top is absolutely critical. And it's really about driving that behavior change so that, culture is, health and safety culture is something that everybody takes seriously and is committed to. And that's why in ISO 45001, culture is explicitly covered and mentioned, and organizations have to show actually how they are measuring and improving the culture of the organization, and leadership have to actually take that from the top of the organization and show commitment to it. So we've touched on, what the aims of 45001 are: provide the safe and healthy workplace, prevent work-related injury and ill health. And it's worth mentioning on ill health that that's not just physical ill health, that is also mental and cognitive ill health. So there's a real focus on mental ill health within this new standard. And I think that's, that's such a step forward as we see and understand what the causes of work-related stress are. We've got a framework here that actually will help organisations deal with some of those challenges. It obviously helps an organisation managing their risks and improving performance and supporting legal compliance. And it doesn't actually touch on it there because focus on risk. But the other thing it focuses on are what are the opportunities? Actually, what can we do differently? How can we make it better? So what are the kind of the key new and enhanced themes? So I'm sure some of you will be familiar with OSAS 18001, which was the British standard that BSI wrote, which provides the framework for 45001. So I'll just sort of touch on, some of the enhancements are and what's new. So if you've been using 18001, then context of the organisation is something that's new to you. But if you're following IATF or ISO 9001 for quality, or ISO 14001 for environment, then you'll be familiar with context of the organisation. And what this focuses on is really making sure that health and safety is aligned and embedded into the strategic objectives of the organisation. quite often historically, you know, health and safety has been this standalone thing that's not part of day-to-day business. You know, it's some poor soul who's sitting up in an office doing risk assessments, and it's not really integrated into the business. And this is what context of the organization really looks to do. We've touched on leadership and the focus on culture, and it's worth pointing out that, again, within the leadership clause of 45,001, it goes much further than the leadership clauses in 9,001 or 14,001. And one of the things that we've seen as a result of that, and the feedback from clients, is because leadership have to be much more engaged in terms of the requirements under 45,001, they're becoming much more engaged in the management systems around quality and environment. So it's driving this overall improvement within the organisation, not just in health and safety. So I think that's something, you know, to bear in mind. And then the other one, which kind of reflects the driver around culture, is although culture absolutely has to be driven from the top of the organisation, you won't really embed and maintain a positive health and safety culture unless you have a really engaged workforce that feels involved and feels that their views and thoughts are being listened to, which is why there's a whole section on consultation and participation. And it's worth bearing in mind that if you haven't seen a copy of the standard, it's worth looking at right at the start at the terms and definitions within the standard itself, because consultation and participation have very clear definitions. So consultation is consulting with workers before a decision is made, and participation is involving the workers in the decision. And a lot of our organisations, you know, sometimes miss that detail. Again, for those of you who are listening from the UK, you know, this is something that we're familiar with because of the regulatory framework that we have in the UK. But again, 45,001 takes this a step further and really brings about all the best practice that we've seen around the globe to what makes effective health and safety. So other key themes are risks and opportunities. So as a health and safety management system, you'd expect it to focus on actually health and safety risks. But as I've mentioned previously, it also focuses on what are your health and safety opportunities? What are the opportunities to make things better? Again, coming back to continual improvement. And it also does talk about, well, what are the broader business risk and the broader opportunities that this health and safety management will bring. So a real focus on both risk management, but also proactive continual improvement. Obviously, it's a health and safety management system, so a key focus is eliminating hazards and reducing risks. And it is worth pointing out, you know, coming back to the point and relating to the next point that you can see there on health, is the section that talks about hazards that you need to identify. It starts right at the top with social factors. So that's things like working hours, bullying, harassment, and that links really closely to the requirements of 9001 7.1.4 for the geeks among you, around psychosocial risk and psychologically healthy workplaces, you know, and is a key part of the IATF requirements. So again, you can see this linkage between all of these standards comes through really strongly. And I've talked about, you know, actually the focus on health, but also well-being. So although well-being is not a requirement of 45,001, it does recognise in the introduction that you can link any well-being initiatives, which are value-added initiatives, to your health and safety management system. So real opportunities there. And then sort of the kind of the last three things that's just worth drawing out is management of change. So for those of you who are familiar with 18,001, management of change was part of the requirements, but now in 45,001 we have a whole dedicated section to management of change. And of course, management of change comes in clause 6 of 9,001. So again, you've got this linkage between these two standards. There's a really significant focus on procurement and making sure that you protecting your reputation and brand through a robust supply chain. So that's looking at what your procurement processes are, making sure that they consider health and safety, that they're written into contractual arrangements, that it focuses on, you know, how you manage your contractors, but also it talks about outsourcing and actually, you know, how do you manage any of your services or products are outsourced in terms of occupational health and safety. And of course, you know, the key to all of this is around continual improvement. So Rob, is there anything that you kind of want to bring out from your point of view on this section?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I think we just need to echo the point we made earlier about the fact that we've got this new high-level structure that links 9, 14, 45, AS aerospace and IATF for automotive in terms of the overall objective is about involving people, it's about managing change, it's about, for us in IATF, and thanks for mentioning 714 because I'm probably one of those geeks, but I'm an automotive geek, not a health and safety geek. So particularly procurement, for us it'll be a lot around supply development. And you think about IATF and the sections about supply development, this is where we're seeing IATF being pushed down the supply chain, but also the use of ISO 45001 from a health and safety perspective being pushed down the supply chain. So not just OEM tier 1 to tier 2, tier 2 to tier 3, tier 3 to tier 4 as you go down there. And obviously the point on this slide really to think about making organisations more agile. The sooner that we're as organisation become certified to ISO 45001, the sooner we can demonstrate on the global footprint our sort of approach to health and safety as an organisation, which is reputation, you know, raises our reputation in the global market of automotive, speaking from an automotive point of view. Whereas, you know, I have organisations that are out in other areas of the world that are not as proactive in terms of health and safety. So we'll get organisations probably in the UK and Americas and maybe some of the Western countries get a bit more of a leg up in terms of procurement and in terms of supply sourcing. But then ultimately, it's all about understanding where we are currently, what measures do we have in place as an organisation, including health and safety and quality and cost and delivery, and then what can we do to make change? Because obviously we're about current state, we need to do about improvement and moving forward, and which is where we come in about the enhancing performance, which leads into the section section 10 in high level structure about continual improvement. And then back again to the ultimate goal of IATF is the reduction of variation and waste in the supply chain. So it all comes back to that procurement and performance enhancing bit. So Kate, thanks for giving me the opportunity to add a bit. So I'm going to pass back to Kate now. She's going to talk to you about the migration plan for 18 to 45.
I'd just like to remind you that we will be having a Q&A section at the end. So, you know, if you've got any questions that you want us to answer, either on ISO 45001 or on IATF, as you've got both the experts in the room, so to speak, then do please let us have your questions. So, so what does implementation of 45001 look like? Or if you've got 18,001, what do you need to know about migration? So whether you're migrating from 18,001 or whether you're implementing your health and safety management system ISO 45001 from scratch, then this kind of just gives an overview of what a journey might look like for an organisation. So a really important starting point is to undertake a gap assessment. You know, what do you have so far, and therefore, you know, where are gaps and what do you need to prioritise? You know, I'm conscious that, you know, maybe some of our listeners haven't got a health and safety management system at the moment, and And that's fine. You know, it can feel really daunting if you haven't got a health and safety management system, and you look at these standards and, you know, their strange language and there's, you know, the processes that they need. But if you've got good legal compliance, you'll be well on the journey here, particularly again if you are based in the UK, because, you know, a lot of our regulatory requirements mean that you will have the processes in place, but your gap assessment will help you identify what you need to focus on. You'll obviously need to think about, you know, training, so training on understanding the requirements of 45001 and implementing it. You'll need to consider obviously training up your auditors, and, you know, because of the focus on 45001 for leadership, you know, how are you going to engage and have your top management brief? So, you know, you need to think about training there. You know, then you can focus internally in terms of, you know, updating your documented information. So that's a really important change, is it's not about documents as in paper copies, it's about documented information. And one of the things that 45001, you know, does ask organizations to do is to think more proportionately about the documentation that they have, or documented information, and actually encourage organizations to minimize it. You know, this is something that we see historically with health and safety, is these huge health and safety manuals that sit on a shelf in a dark corner of somebody's office, gathering dust, and actually, you know, they're not meaningful. They don't have meaningful processes that the organizer actually uses. So again, that's something that 45000 focuses on. You'll need to think about how you give awareness and training to the broader, for your broader staff about 45001, and that, you know, and at that point you'll be ready hopefully to roll out and implement the standard internally, and, you know, and then you can look at the certification and accreditation process. So that, you know, the journey for most organizations is the same. In terms of giving a structure and an overview, and, you know, all of our organizations who have gone through that process, you know, have found it straightforward. You know, most organizations actually have a lot more than they maybe think, so it's not as if it's a big uphill struggle. So just to give a flavour of that, I'm going to hand back to Rob. He's just going to talk through one of our clients that have achieved 45001.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. So interesting comments. I think structure about the way to implement and migrate your system across from 18 to 45. Yeah, we go back to Stadco, big organisation, Magna Stadco, big tier 1 supplier globally. We recently did some work with them in terms of OHS, and you can see here from the information that's been provided, they talk about not just relying on your occupational health and safety team to implement it. Other parts of the business need to be included to get the maximum benefit. And this goes back to about employee engagement and the point that Kate just made about the interesting conversations about what called consultation and participation, the subtle difference between the two. Stadco talked about the leadership team embraced the standard and supported it. So that's the issue about leadership within the standard. If you talk about section 5, specifically in a high level structure, and the need for them to engage. Take time to involve the workforce. Magna Stadco did a huge amount of internal awareness, internal training, internal auditor support in terms of training the requirements. And you see their last point in terms of they're coming back to us after we'd successfully got them certified. The more people you get trained up on the standard helps you to integrate it into your business. So this goes back to the part, you know, question 1, 87% of people said it was the employee's responsibility. They felt it was their responsibility, so very much levels with that. For example, we trained the quality team on health and safety and the health and safety team on quality management. So, you know, some good cross-functional stuff there, good in terms of internal audit. And we made sure we had lead auditors at each site. So this wasn't something, and in Magna Stadco, a big corporate organisation, this wasn't something that was kept in the corporate headquarters and people come out from corporate HQ once a year and go and see the plants. They had the lead auditors in each site. So they very much gave the site the responsibility for the internal health and safety system, aligned with the quality management system. So thanks for sharing. I'm going to pass back to Kate, and then we're probably about 3 or 4 slides away from Q&A.
Great, thanks, Rob. So for those of you who do have 18,001 already, then it's important to understand that 18,001 will be withdrawn in March 2021. So if you want to maintain your health and safety management system, or as we've heard, you know, there may be specific requirements within the supply chain coming down from the OEMs, you're going to need to have ISO 45001. So you need to migrate over, well, the 2 years now we've got left to do that. And migration, you know, you can talk to BSI about what your migration options are. It's designed to make it as simple as possible, but you know, there is extra time that you need to booking and consider for that migration before you can move to ISO 45001. So if you haven't started to think about that migration, I'd really encourage you to do that now, because it's not only your internal planning that you need to think about, but you know, BSI, we need to make sure that we've got the resources to help you on that journey. And if everybody leaves it to the last 2 months, then you know, realistically, that's not great for your business. And you know, we need to make sure we're in a position to support you the best way we can. So yeah, so the clock is ticking down. And you've got 2 years left. So I'll hand over to Ellie for our last poll before we finish.
Thanks very much, Kate. So you will see the final poll question of this afternoon on your screen now. And the question is, which of the below best describes your organisation's position in relation to ISO 45001? So we are ISO 45001 certified, we're working towards certification, we're considering certification, we currently don't have plans to certify, and I don't know. So no one on the line today is 45 certified, 44% are working towards certification, 20% considering, and 36% currently don't have plans to certify. So some interesting results there. I'm going to pass back to Kate for her comment.
Lovely, great. Thanks, Ellie. So it's great to see that you know, nearly half of you are actually working towards 45001. So hopefully some of the comments I've made about what that journey looks like, and you know, actually how straightforward that is resonating. For those of you who are considering it, then you know, that's great. If you're, you know, as we've touched on, if you're in the automotive supply chain, and this is for those of you in the you have no plans currently to certify, it's something that is, you know, that we will see flowing down the supply chain. We've touched on customer specific requirements. There are already some OEMs that are requiring you to have 45001, well, or looking for you to have a health and safety management system in place. So you know, it's something that you really want to consider if you are in the automotive supply chain. So thank you. So just in terms of, so you know, if you are started your journey, thinking about your journey, or yet to get going on your journey, BSI has a huge amount of support information available to you. There's the documents that you've hopefully downloaded while we've been on this webinar, but if you go onto our website, there's additional material there in terms of implementation and mapping guides. Also, we've done a series of webinars that actually went through ISO 45001 kind of clause by clause, if you like, and they're available on our website as well. So you know, there's lots of free information there, and of course we offer a range of training actually to help and support you right through from understanding what the standard actually is, to implementing it, to looking at migration, to lead auditor, and importantly, as we've touched on, for training for your top management. So there's plenty of help and support out there, and that brings us nicely on to our Q&A section.
So what we'll do now is we'll turn to your questions, and I'll hand back over to our experts here to give those responses. So the first question is, ISO 45001 5.4 requires participation of non-managerial workers. What are best practice examples in an automotive factory? Over to
I guess because
Rob.
it's got the word automotive in it, and the automotive sector champion is going to get the question. Yeah, I think I just like, I mean, Kate's got some good examples. I think we shouldn't necessarily think about it from a point of view of auto, but just manufacturing, I guess. But I think the interesting point, I'd go back to the slide that we put up about Magna Stadco. They were very proactive, and they really talked about take time to involve the workforce. So although it was a global corporate initiative at a plant level, it was led by obviously the leadership team, but it was more bottom up than top down, because they spent a lot of time involving the workforce, the associates and all that. So that's non-managerial workers, and they did things like suggestion schemes. They didn't build it separately, they built it into the management system. So their management system is very much incorporating quality, environmental and health and safety. So I think the trick was, don't just do it as a standalone, integrate it into the business management system. So when you got things like, you're implementing new manufacturing processes, then build those health and safety related issues into the standardized work and the work instructions. So don't make it something different, build it into the organization. And the thing that came back from Stadco and Magna was the fact they spent a lot of time working with the employees, or the associates, if you want to call them, on the shop floor, because at the end of the day, they're the ones working in the conditions they're working in. They're the ones that know what issues that come up that you might not even see when you plan an automotive cell. So hopefully that answers the question, but obviously if Kate wants to add any additional, I'll leave it open to Kate.
So I think the only thing that I just pick up for those of you who aren't familiar with 45001 is this term non-managerial workers. So that was written specifically into the standard to make sure that those, we might use the expression in the UK, those on the shop floor are engaged in health and safety. It's not a management decision, or it's not just supervisors. You really are getting direct engagement from those who are doing the work, and that might be on the production line, but don't forget all the other what we might term back office staff, or if you're directly employing cleaners or other your facilities management team. 45001 is really looking at how your organization engages with the entire workforce, as Rob said, from the bottom up, and not just from the top down.
Thanks very much, Kate and Rob. Another question we've got here is probably for Kate. Does 45001 require you to have a health and safety committee?
Okay, thanks, Ellie. So I think this is a good question. So within the standard, under the leadership clause, it says that if a health and safety committee is set up by the organisation as one of the ways to demonstrate consultation and participation, then leadership should support that health and safety committee. The standard in itself does not require a health and safety committee. Obviously, that needs to be reflected against any regulatory requirements where there may actually be a requirement for a health and safety committee. But no, within 45001, it's if one of the ways that you will demonstrate the consultation and participation is through a health and safety committee, then top management have to support that committee.
Thanks very much, Kate. Another question here around training. So what training is available for ISO 45001?
Okay, thank you. So I think I've kind of touched on that, but it doesn't hurt to reiterate it. So there's a range of training. So simply from understanding the requirements of the standards through to implementing it in your organisation. We have some dedicated training in terms of actually if you've got 18001 migrating to 45001. So that training really focuses on, what are the key differences and what do you need to think about doing. doing differently. We have the lead auditor training, and again, you know, if you haven't done lead auditor training, we've got the full course sort of starting from scratch. But if you've got lead auditor under 18,001 already, we just kind of do, you might call it a conversion course or an upgrade course. And I've touched on the fact that we've also got, you know, the executive briefings for your top management team. So, you know, there really is a complete range of training that is available to help and support you on this journey.
Thanks very much, Kate. So all that remains is me to thank Rob and Kate for a great presentation. Thank you to you, the audience, for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed the webinar. So thank you very much again for your attention, and goodbye.